Have you looked at the real estate market recently and just sighed? Yeah, me too. If you've been feeling that sting, you are absolutely not alone. We're currently looking at a market where housing prices just keep climbing, and at the same time, mortgage rates are staying incredibly elevated. It's a brutal combination, honestly. It's creating these massive costs that are effectively pricing so many Americans entirely out of the market. For a lot of us, that traditional idea of solo homeownership, buying a place all on your own, it's starting to feel like an impossible dream. Well, welcome to today's explainer. The good news? Buyers are getting incredibly smart. They're using this highly creative strategy to finally unlock the housing market for themselves. Today, we're diving into a massive shift in how real estate is actually being purchased right now. It's called collaborative homeownership. And let me tell you, it is completely reshaping what the American dream looks like in practice. All right, let's start with Section 1, the housing affordability crisis. Which brings us right to our solution in Section 2. The rise of co-buying. So what exactly are we talking about when we say collaborative ownership? Well, co-buying is simply defined as two or more people combining their finances to buy a home. It's a remarkably straightforward concept, right? But the impact it has on your capability as a buyer is absolutely huge. Real estate pros are seeing that by teaming up, you instantly spread out those painful upfront costs, things like the down payment and the closing fees. But even more importantly, you dramatically boost your overall borrowing power. You see, when you apply for a mortgage, lenders look really closely at your debt-to-income ratio. By putting multiple incomes on a single loan application, you fundamentally change the math. Suddenly, that incredibly high barrier to entry doesn't actually look so insurmountable. And we're seeing a really clear generational shift in how people are approaching this. Just look at these numbers from a 2025 survey. This was done by First Home IQ, which is a nonprofit financial literacy organization, and the mortgage insurance provider National MI. Look at this. A massive 32% of Gen Z buyers, so those aged 18 to 24, are actively considering co-buying. Now compare that to 18% of millennials, the 25 to 44 crowd. The younger generation is looking at the skyrocketing costs of rent and real estate, and they're realizing almost immediately that joining forces is their best strategic play. They just aren't tied to that older, kind of outdated stigma that says you absolutely have to do it all by yourself. And hey, if you think this is just some hypothetical idea for the future, the data proves otherwise. According to a 2024 survey from JW Surety Bonds, nearly 15% of Americans have already purchased a home with someone other than a romantic partner. Let that sink in. Even more telling, almost half of the people they surveyed said they would actively consider co-buying if it meant they could finally own property. So this is rapidly moving from a niche, unconventional workaround to a fully mainstream real estate strategy. Mortgage lenders are literally seeing this every single day. To understand exactly why this whole thing is catching fire, consider this insight from Alvaro Moreira. He's the founder of Moreira Team Mortgage Rate, a lender based out of Georgia. He points out that the affordability issue is a real big problem, but, and here's the key, combining incomes, combining assets does allow them to normally buy a home they're more interested in. This is such a crucial point. It's not just about barely scraping by to get a tiny little starter home. Not at all. It's a sign of the times. Individuals simply might not have the solo income to buy in that specific neighborhood they want, but together they can actually qualify for a significantly larger property, maybe a better school district, or a home that doesn't require massive, expensive renovations. Okay, let's move along to Section 3, types of home co-ownership. We understand why people are doing this, but how exactly does it work legally? Well, there are two primary legal pathways you can take when co-buying. The first one is called joint tenancy. In this structure, ownership is shared completely evenly, regardless of who put in what amount of money. All parties have to agree to a sale, and if someone passes away, ownership automatically transfers right to the surviving owners. This one is very often used by family members or married couples who just want a seamless transition of assets. Alternatively, we have tenancy in common. Now, this is much more flexible, making it highly practical for co-buyers. Why? Because ownership shares are based strictly on your financial contribution. If you put in 70% of the money for the down payment, boom, you own 70% of the house. Plus, individual shares can actually be sold or inherited without forcing everyone else to sell the entire property. As you might guess, tenancy in common is absolutely perfect for friends or buyers who are making unequal financial contributions. Which leads us to a very important topic in Section 4, protecting your real estate. Now, as logical and great as the strategy sounds, combining finances is serious business. You know it, I know it. It introduces shared credit risk, liquidity constraints, and some major legal complexities. Because of those inherent risks, professionals strongly advise putting concrete legal documentation in place before anyone signs a mortgage. One highly popular and effective method: forming an LLC, or a limited liability company. Real estate firms that specialize in these arrangements, like Picasso, point out that co-owners can use an LLC to formally manage the equity agreement and clearly spell out everyone's financial responsibilities. It fundamentally treats the home purchase like a formal business partnership. And doing this is incredibly beneficial because it separates personal emotions and friendships from strict financial obligations. It provides a really necessary layer of clarity and legal protection. So the absolute crucial takeaway here is this: you must have a written agreement. Lawyers from the Florida-based real estate firm, the Law Office of Sam J. Saud III, stress that your documentation needs to outline three major pillars: exactly how maintenance decisions are made, exactly how ongoing costs are divided, and, perhaps most importantly, how someone can exit the arrangement if life circumstances change. I mean, think about it. What happens if one friend gets married and wants to move out? What happens if someone unfortunately loses their job? Addressing these safeguards up front, before there is any tension whatsoever, is literally the only way to protect both your financial investment and your personal relationships. As Picasso advises, you really need to choose co-owners who deeply value transparency, communication, and shared responsibility. Now let's look at a fascinating twist in Section 5, the family co-buying strategy. Because here's the thing: co-buying isn't just for cash-strapped young friends looking to get their foot in the door with a starter home. Not anymore. Families are increasingly turning to this exact same strategy. We are seeing a massive rise in multi-generational co-buying, where older parents are teaming up and going in on properties with their adult children. In this specific trend, it is fundamentally reshaping what the modern American household looks like. Instead of everyone struggling to maintain separate households in a really high-cost environment, they are consolidating, and this often results in the purchase of much larger properties, places that have guest houses, accessory dwelling units, or just highly distinct separate living spaces. This family approach builds into a frankly brilliant lifestyle and financial strategy. First, the family pools their resources to buy a property that accommodates those separate living spaces, meaning, everyone still gets their privacy. Second, the parents move onto the property, which allows for much closer day-to-day family involvement without the burden of maintaining an empty nest all alone. And third, as Alvaro Moreira points out, it is a fantastic way to save significantly on childcare costs because, well, the grandparents are right there on the property. This multi-generational approach is just so powerful because it actually solves multiple modern problems all at once. We're talking housing affordability, elder care, and childcare, all under one unified roof. So, we've seen how skyrocketing costs are pushing buyers to get highly creative. We're talking about everything from Gen Z friends splitting a mortgage in the city to grandparents moving into a suburban guest house to help raise the kids. The traditional solo path to homeownership is rapidly changing, and collaborative buying is opening doors that a lot of people thought were closed forever. Now, for sure, it's a strategy that requires trust, heavy communication, and some rock-solid legal agreements. But the payoff? It can be absolutely life-changing. Which brings us to the ultimate question you have to ask yourself. As the American dream continues to evolve, who would you trust enough to co-buy a home with? It's definitely something to think about. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time as we continue to break down the trends shaping our world.